Hi, my name is Ciara Shiggins, and I'm a speech and language therapist by background and a postdoctoral research fellow within the Centre of Research Excellence in Aphasia Recovery and Rehabilitation. And I'm based in Melbourne, Australia at La Trobe University. But as you can probably tell, I'm originally from Ireland. I'm from Wexford. So it's a real joy to be able to get home for a few hours to be able to present at this conference, even if it is just virtually.
My name is Duffy. I've been living with aphasia since 2012. This presentation will use both live video and also recorded video, primarily for my benefit.
And today, Ian and I are going to present on how we developed an aphasia-accessible patient research experience survey through co-production. And we did this with multiple stakeholders. So these were representatives from academia, people who worked at the University of East Anglia, people with aphasia and their family members, people who worked within the NHS, so the National Health Service, as clinicians, and also representation from the National Institute for Health Research. And this is the research arm of the NHS, and it funds a lot of the health research that occurs within the UK. And this was a project that we worked on together in Norwich in the United Kingdom when I was working at the University of East Anglia. And to provide a bit of context for this presentation, aphasia is a chronic communication disability, and it occurs when the language centres of the brain are impacted in some way. And that can be as a result of a stroke or some trauma, for example, a traumatic brain injury, or an infection or a brain tumour. And it results in people having difficulties in language. And that can either be the understanding of language, in how language is spoken, or reading or writing. And this can be in different combinations and to different severities. And aphasia is quite common, actually. A little over a third of people post-stroke will present with aphasia.
And in this short film, I tried to explain and clarify what aphasia has meant for me. I had a brain hemorrhage in 2012, and I have suffered from aphasia since then. What this means is that what I hear is difficult to process. It takes me time, and in a noisy environment, I really have great difficulty in understanding.
In that video, Ian really eloquently explains what aphasia means for him and how it impacts on his day-to-day life. And as you can imagine, language is so integral to so many aspects of our lives and how we participate in different activities. So if your language was affected in some way, you can try to get a little bit of an insight into the impact this could have on your day-to-day life. And this is also true in research, because research is quite a language-loaded process. Either people are communicating with each other about what the project is about, or people have to read or sign different forms. And as a result, people with aphasia can face barriers throughout that research process, from design, being part of patient and public involvement, right through to how research is disseminated. And as a result, people with aphasia are often excluded from research, either intentionally or by research materials, resources, and processes being inaccessible to them, and adaptations and accommodations not being made to ensure that they can meaningfully participate in that research process. Each year, the NIHR conducts a patient in research experience survey. And this is a survey that's given to any participants that have taken part in NIHR funded research. And by doing so, the NIHR want to collect data on what was good for them when they took part in research and what could be done better. And it's extremely important that everyone's able to give their feedback on their experience in taking part in research, because feedback enhances processes and procedures. But this may be even more important for those with aphasia who face barriers to participation across that research process, and who may need additional modifications to that process to be able to engage meaningfully. So it's really important that people with aphasia would be able to have a voice within that feedback process. However, research nurses who administered the patient research experience survey across the UK identified that there was a very low completion rate of the survey for those with aphasia. And they thought that this was because the version of the survey that was in circulation was inaccessible to those with aphasia. As a result, people with aphasia were excluded from that process and were not able to feed back into that patient in research experience cycle.
And this format of requesting information is simply overwhelming for me and others suffering from aphasia.
Yeah, so in its current form, or in its form when the request came to us to adapt it to make it accessible to those with aphasia, it was very language heavy and it wasn't very simple or straightforward. And as a result, the NHR approached my colleague Kath Mayers, because she had previously worked with them creating digital technologies, and asked her to develop an aphasia-accessible version. She got in contact with me because of my experience working with those with aphasia and making information accessible to those with aphasia, and asked me to be part of the team. And at this point, we had a decision to make. We could have gone off as a two, and we could have changed that survey based on our experience and our skills and the evidence base. However, we personally felt that it would be inappropriate to develop an aphasia-accessible patient research experience survey without people with aphasia on the team, as of course people with aphasia would be the best people to be able to judge whether the survey was accessible for them or not. Research also shows that products are more likely to be taken up and actually implemented into practice if all the potential end users are involved in the production of those products. And therefore, we looked at all the different potential end users and we asked representatives from all of these different groups to be part of the team. And as a result, we came up with our group, which represented people with aphasia, family members, the NIHR, clinical colleagues, and we worked together in partnership from the very start of this project right through to the very end. So we were a collaboration and everyone was equal in that process. We also consulted with stroke research nurses. These were the people that administered the survey, and IT specialists within the NHS to see if what we were creating would be useful to the people who needed to use it, but also if it would work in context. So we consulted them at certain time points throughout the process. And by doing so, we embodied this definition of co-production, where we had a group of people from different backgrounds coming together to create a service which worked for them all. This approach was value-driven and built on the principle that those who use a service are best placed to help design it. And this is why we chose to do patient and public involvement work through co-production for this particular project.
And here I talk a little bit about my motivation for taking part in this project.
The opportunity to work as a contributor in this area has, it's brought a number of things. Firstly, it allows me to do something that influences and improves the lives of others, albeit in a small way. Being a contributor also it provides me with meaning, and to be part of a team. And thirdly, being a contributor boosts my knowledge of the difficulties I have, and that allows me to improve my own strategies for dealing with life, and to constantly keep on the road of progress. So it has it's been a wonderful opportunity. I fell into it. I didn't know what it was, but it really is a very important part of my life now.
So once we had the team together that was representative of the different end users, we got through a process of co-producing the content of the survey, the format that it'll be presented in, the process for administration, and also how the survey would be disseminated. So we started by completely throwing out the old survey, just getting the 3 questions that the NHR needed to be included in the survey. And then we started to develop the content with all team members. So we started by asking people with aphasia what was important to them when they took part in research. And then based on their responses, we used this to develop the questions for the survey. So for example, the people with aphasia in this group emphasised that feeling valued in research was very, very important to them. And this was enacted by being given time to be able to ask questions and having those questions responded to in accessible ways for them. And as a result, we had a question on the survey that said, were you given the time you needed to ask questions about this project and were these questions answered in accessible ways? So this really started to help us develop that content iteratively with the group. Once we had the questions, we were thinking about how we'd format the survey to ensure that it was accessible to people with aphasia. We went through loads of different iterations to get everything in place for this. And then we got to this point where the format of the survey had been completely changed to enhance its accessibility for those with aphasia. However, people with aphasia on the team said that actually in the paper format, it mightn't be accessible to all those with aphasia. And that's because it still relied on people with aphasia having to read the questions. And so they suggested that we also had a digital version where the questions were read aloud. So we used what we had on the paper version and we transferred that to a digital version. Once we had both versions of the survey ready to go, we worked and did usability testing with the team members with aphasia. And when the people with aphasia hit a point in completing the survey where there was a barrier, then we were able to problem solve together as a group how we could overcome that barrier. And then we further developed the survey to enhance its accessibility. But the team members on this group really emphasised that one of the key issues to them in taking part in research was that not many people understood what aphasia was. And that created a lot of barriers for them, but also they felt quite stigmatised as a result. And so they insisted that there was an explanation of aphasia on the front of the survey, but also tips on how to communicate best for the person with aphasia and tips for the research nurses on how to administer the survey with them. And this needed to be at the very start of the survey. Once we had the survey ready to go, we disseminated it at a launch event where we invited a range of different perspectives and a range of different stakeholders to attend, as we hope that this would further enhance the implementation of this survey. And people and team members, both with and without aphasia, presented at this event. And this survey has kept having its impact. So it's now in circulation in the UK. But the changes that we made to the survey also influenced the other versions of the survey that are available. So the adult, child, intellectual disability, and so the version of the survey for people with dementia. So all those versions have been changed within the Eastern region, and also the adult and the child versions have been changed across the UK. So what did we learn by doing this project in this way? So co-production is a way of conducting research collaboratively where power and responsibility is shared between all the different team members throughout the research cycle. And we really feel that we embodied this throughout this project. Also in co-production, all the team members' perspectives and their opinions need to be seen in the end product. And we don't think that we could have created what we did had we not had the team that we did and the variety of different perspectives.
Oh, and here I talk about the inclusion of people with aphasia in this project?
There is a need for much more research to be done, and it's vital that research that's done includes people who have aphasia and dealing with the aphasia, and including people with aphasia, of course, creates problems of its own, not least because some of us will have a difficulty with comprehension, and others of us will have difficulty with speech, as well as probably other difficulties linked to the stroke or the brain injury that's been experienced.
So as Ian's outlined there, people with aphasia might have a variety of different difficulties when they're engaging in any form of patient and public involvement. And as a result, it's really important for all team members to think about how they are going to be inclusive of people with aphasia or any team members across that research process. So accessibility needs to be considered at the very beginning. And for us, we took time at the beginning of the process to discuss how we wanted to work together. And during this phase, suggestions were made to enhance that accessibility of the process. So for example, all information and materials needed to be in aphasia-accessible formats, and they needed to be sent in advance to all team members so people had time to process the information, but also to put together their contributions in advance. We also thought it was really important to consider different teams' backgrounds and experiences, and for us to openly discuss those at the first meetings, as that helped to equalize some of those power dynamics and those traditional research hierarchies, because everyone could understand why the other person was at the table and what they brought to the project. And everyone could see that the different perspectives were valuable to that outcome. People in different groups have been part of research in different roles. So we needed to be clear about the level of involvement for this project, that it would be a co-production and that we would be working collaboratively throughout the process. And this needed to be very clear to people so that they could understand their roles, their responsibilities, and the expectations, which could help them to actually decide whether they wanted to take part or not. But like everything in life, things change. And so you also need a certain amount of flexibility around these discussions and processes. But every time that there was a change, we came back to the group and we discussed that change and how we'd be able to overcome it as a group and what would suit everyone best and how it would help us to work together.
Put simply, the process of gathering information from people with aphasia was in focus, rather than just the collection of raw data for research. And yes, I'm talking a little more here about the benefits of taking part in this project.
Being involved in this project and involved with PPI has been challenging, but it has been extremely enjoyable and fulfilling. The time with the researchers, time with others who are facing similar difficulties, it creates a situation which feels like life is normal again. And of course, then we leave the meeting, we go away, and we then back to our more limited existence. I won't say negative, but I think it's our lives are limited by the challenges we face with communication. So yeah, involvement has been fantastic. It really has. It's wonderful to be able to contribute. It's wonderful to meet with people who give you the time, who choose different media with which to communicate. It's what can I say? It's been a wonderful experience.
So as Ian has outlined there, it is really beneficial to include people with a range of perspectives, including those with aphasia, within the research process. However, it is essential, therefore, that you think about accessibility and inclusion to ensure that those people are meaningfully included, because it is an intensive process and it takes a lot of time for people and a lot of their resource. So you want to ensure that they're actually meaningfully included and not just sitting at the table, not able to contribute. For academic staff, I'd say we can think about, really think about the resources that you have. Do you have the time to really invest in making that process accessible? And if you don't, potentially you need to think of another way of involving people, potentially at a different level of involvement that's not as resource intensive. You also need to be clear about why you're doing this. And if it is just to tick a box on a form, reconsider doing involvement, because it's going to end up wasting people's time, and time that people are going to have to contribute to this that they might take away from other activities that they could be doing or might have a negative impact on them on a day-to-day basis. And we regret not formally evaluating this project to think about the impacts and the benefits that it would have. And we would encourage others to do that in a more formal way, as this may also influence the ability for people to be able to get more resource, either money through grant funding, or else resources and time through workload allocation. We've also recently published a paper on the ethical considerations of patient and public involvement, and there are considerations across the research process that we would encourage people to look at before they engage in patient and public involvement with people with aphasia. But I also would like to draw your attention to the central bubble, where there is preparatory work that needs to be done to work with the people that you want to work with, to understand their needs, to understand what they are coming to that process with, so that you can best know how to work together in an accessible way and develop that trusting relationship.
What could we have done better? Looking back, I'm not sure there is much we could have done, given the time and the resources that we had. But what we also know is that this is a journey, and we've taken a big step, but there are other steps to be taken in the future, and we therefore hand the baton on to another group who will do that.
Exactly. So we also want people to think about the fact that we've given you a base plate, but in the future, you may also need to consider how you translate that into online working. Because a lot of our work was done face-to-face, but we ended that online, and we did need to make adaptations as we hit the new normal of having to work together and collaborate online.
The new normal is a very, very powerful phrase. I think it conveys a lot. I think it contains an enormous amount of hope. But I think in reality, and I think being realistic, it will contribute to the long-term development of research methods that take in the patient experience in the best possible way.
And so we share some words from our colleague Linda, who's another person that lives with aphasia, and she used the analogy that this paper was like a procedure, steps and guidelines to follow, but that this is a live document and nothing is perfect. And as time progresses and technology progresses, things will be adapted. But what we want to share with you is our foundation for what we did and how you can develop this further. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present this work. We'd like to thank our team, the NIHR for funding, Ruth for inviting us to give this presentation, and the organising committee for all their help getting this presentation online. Thank you.
Thank you.